you grow old in resentment of having never, taken that trip or opened up that business or ran with that idea to its completion and a level of commitment. I think people are easily spurned, especially in the beginning. It's almost like when you plant a seed, that would be its most vulnerable period is when it's both in seed form and when it's like a little seedling. So I think there's that level of vulnerability usually in the beginning, but it's people who have a commitment to the vision to see it through, which I think takes practice. You hear about a lot of really successful people that weren't afraid to fail. So I think it's examining the fear of failure, and it's about examining the fear that's associated with other people's influence or their view of you. So I think you, in a way, need to kind of be self-centered, as in centered in the self, and really wake up, committed to that vision.
I don't know if you were looking at my notes here on my page, but on my personal page, you couldn't have been because it's impossible. But your response to sustaining this level of self-motivation was the exact reason that I had come up with how people could sustain this level of self-motivation. And very successful people have gotten beyond the fear of failure. People that are able to understand that failure is part of the process and part of something that they're going to encounter along their way of being motivated and continue to stay motivated. It's that they don't see fear as an obstacle in that sense. They see it as another motivating factor to move beyond it. And I think for the people out there that hit that wall that first time, they either run from it or, hurdle it. And it's that same idea to me. I mean, on a personal level, I remember working in a corporate job for 6 years, and you have a bunch of people around you, scratching their heads saying, why would you want to quit a job that you're getting great medical for, you're being paid a high salary to fulfill some dream to go travel, in a part of the world. And there's that fear there. There's this fear of this hurdle that's there of other peer pressure, your own internal voices telling you shouldn't do this. But yet I remember the exact day when I mentally got over that hurdle, and I said, when people kept asking this question, when you come back from traveling, what are you going to do then? And once I came up with the answer of saying, I don't know, and I was okay with that answer, then I could leave. And that was that first hurdle of jumping, something to continue to be motivated to travel and continue to be motivated to seek the next thing out in life. And that one hurdle was all it took. And now that next time I reach fear, it's just become a little bit shorter of a hurdle, a little bit shorter, and it's not a jump anymore, and it's just a step. And soon, you're just on a full sprint towards your goals and dreams. So I think a fear of failure and successful people or motivated people have gotten past that.
Completely. When you are jumping into the unknown, you threaten everybody else's narrative who is waking up day after day and having committed to this vision that is good enough, at least good enough for them, or predictable because it's safe. And when you make a decision to follow your greatness into somewhere that is uncomfortable for other people, or perhaps unknown, even as a concept, especially more, I would find that in countries in Europe or in Australia, where at a young age you get a gap year in between, this is something that's kind of, this travel therapy notion is widely accepted as a method of transitioning, both career-wise or maybe even after dealing with some hardship. I think one of the easiest things that a lot of people could relate to, either early on in life or really at any stage, is heartbreak. And I think heartbreak comes both in the form of death, which is inevitable, or simply a relationship breaking up. And very often widows or just people who've been divorced or simply broken up with, find a fear of love and a fear of beginning again because of how much hurt they went through. And I think when you think of it professionally or you think of it traveling, there's a couple of steps. You get the business license, you can do it on the side as a hobby, but something like love, where you at least ideally want to put your entirety and your totality into it, I think a lot of people get afraid, gun shy, so to speak, and that source of love has to come from within. And when you experience a tragedy, if you will, in terms of the heart, as losing a partner, for example, or divorce would be considered on the higher end of the most stressful things you could ever experience. So there is a degree of trauma to them. One has to look within again to find that, and then that's how they attract it. But I believe that this is an inner journey, this motivation, as much as it prompts you to take actual action. And the notion of something like ambition versus motivation is ambition is wanting to accomplish something, as where motivation is the reason you want to accomplish something. So says the internet, and I believe that the desire has to be there, because essentially to be happy you need to be more satisfied than you desire. Which is something Dan Millman, the guy from Way of the Peaceful Warrior, wrote, that always read a formula that always resonated with me. And so sometimes that desire, whether it's a desire to travel, the desire to love again, the desire to work for yourself, which is ambition as a whole, to say that it's an ambitious person, that's a person that has desires. Sometimes ambition goes out of control and they never find satisfaction. So it's always this horizon consciousness. They're always running towards something. They never truly arrive. As where motivation is kind of this reasoning, the way that you see it better, the way that you can comprehend the steps that are going to get you there in a lot of ways. So I think motivation and ambition, it's a bit of a muddled interpretation, because I think they do kind of blend together, but on a lot of levels, motivation has to come. There's a realist and idealist melange that kind of comes at that stage where you have the dream and you see the actions that you need to take as a result.
We were at an interesting point, which is the level of motivation between ambition and kind of where it stems from. I'm wondering if motivation is an inward journey. Is that our process to get there? Is that our process to find our own motivation? Is kind of being with ourselves? I know we touched on this in previous episodes and asking within, but ambition is maybe that outward desire, but maybe ambition is the result of our inward journey to find our motivation, and it's manifesting itself as ambition to everybody else. But is motivation this inward journey to find out what is going to spark us, what is going to sustain us, what's going to stem this fuel to our fire?
Fuel to the fire is the exact essence of motivation in a lot of ways. It's a fire, because if you just pour the gasoline on there, it could burn right out as quickly as you started, because you get so pumped up on it. You tell everybody that you have this vision, you're gonna, this is what you're gonna do, and then you don't follow through because you feel like there's a part of the satisfaction. You're already patting yourself on the back for having succeeded before you've even begun. And a lot of people lose that motivation early on. Think about a bunch of kids sitting around the fire, smoking pot and coming up with these grand dreams that fall through their hands. But on the same token, think about a corporate office who's sitting in front of a motivational speaker, and there's a renewal, there's a freshness, and there's a mutual camaraderie to share in this vision due to this outside motivation. But that fire it all comes from within. Whether you want to call it the third eye or our physical eyes, we're constantly searching for motivation. And it is like a fire. We can keep it burning, or it can go out where people kind of give up in a lot of ways in their lives. So I think if we treat it like a fire to be tended with respect, mindfully placing the tinder and the larger logs once that fire is already burning, so we don't just throw the logs on and, sprinkle it with lighter fluid and see how long it'll go for, but it's actually something that we tend within in order to sustain a life of motivation, to be a motivation, and maybe so much so that we can be a motivation to other people to seek their greatness as well.
That's a great point on the fire, and like any fire, a fire has the ability to rage completely out of control, if not tended to. We can't just throw all our logs on the fire and just watch them go up in one bright burst of flame. The brightest flame burns quickest. And I'm wondering, in your mind, the fire that's raging out of control is motivation. Can motivation ever be an unhealthy thing in that sense? Can it consume us so much so that we neglect other things in our life? We're so motivated, we're so focused, we're so determined to see this journey to the end that we don't balance it out with the other things in our life, our relationships, our work, any other things that we have connections to that need that proper balance.
Work-life balance obviously is one of those things where if someone is a workaholic, they, and every weekend when they're supposed to be watching their kids' dance recital or taking their wife or husband to a family gathering, that they keep bailing on their responsibilities to their loved ones. Obviously there's something to that. On the other hand, you have the Nazi Party. They were very, very motivated individuals. You have the Khmer Rouge. These are all very motivated individuals who have a doctrine and cannot be deterred. And perhaps history is harsh on Hitler in a lot of ways, as Jimmy Carr once said, because, after all, he did kill Hitler. So I'd like to think that we can be blinded easily. And I think it's called tunnel vision. It's when we make a greater commitment to the vision that we're pursuing than our reality, and we're neglecting those things around us. And I know a lot of workaholics that neglect their physicality or neglect their physical health. They work so much they don't eat, all day, and then they realize how hungry they are, or they're sick, and then the sickness gets worse and worse. Because they're just not giving them that time to rest. So I think there's overtly motivated people that, because they're so driven, they lose sight of even themselves within that process. So it's almost like they're such an idealist that they're lost in the dream in a lot of ways. And very often it's a result of narcissism or a lack of self-worth, because they have that much to prove to other people that they don't really authentically have that self-love.
Isn't that often the conclusion we get to, though? Self-love. Its role plays an integral factor in all things life, and it's no different than when we come to talk about motivation. So let's review and find out what we learned. When we consider the entire picture of motivation, it can be empowering or distracting. We can use it to ascend to another level of personal growth, or as a crutch to keep us from exploring ourselves by focusing on something else entirely. People can be motivated by revenge, drugs, or on the flip side, love and the pursuit of happiness. It matters not the reason, but as we found, the person that's casting the fishing line. To be ambitious, set goals, and accomplish them with vigor virtually embodies motivation in every form of the word, but as we found, if we're not doing it with integrity, living our personal truth, these efforts seem in vain. For how do we measure success? Is it merely by a motivated person? Or is it by one who aligns himself with their story within and uses that inward journey and discovery as the fuel to the fire? While it's easiest to ignite that fire by a life-altering trauma, that's also the flame that burns the quickest. To sustain a fire that we can stoke for a lifetime requires finding out why we want to stoke the fire in the first place. Thus, it would seem self-evident that if we wish to showcase a level of external motivation that can last, we must go inward before we can go outward. To enjoy more content from The Spoken You, download our podcast from iTunes or Stitcher. Write to us on thedailyu.org, or follow the discussion on Twitter at @TheDailyU, or like us on Facebook. As always, join us here every Monday where we challenge the status quo and engage our brains for something beyond the screen. This is The Spoken You with Jeff and Brett, signing off.